The ground on Titan 7 looked dead. Broken metal stuck out everywhere like grave markers. Some holes in the ground still glowed with strange light from powerful weapons. Saul Reeves walked carefully through all the trash and broken things. His medical bag hit his side with each step. He looked for anyone still alive after another bloody fight. 18 months of this mess, he said to himself. He stepped over what used to be an alien spaceship. The beautiful curved metal was now just melted junk and broken crystal pieces that sparkled in the weak sunlight from the star called Kepler 438. 18 months and we're still fighting over this poisoned rock. His radio made a crackling sound. Sergeant Hayes spoke through it. His voice sounded tired and sad. "Reeves, did you find anyone alive out there?" "I got 3 human soldiers back to the hospital tent," Saul answered. He looked at his scanner for signs of life. 2 wounded aliens locked up for the intelligence guys to question. "Just the usual cleanup after a battle, Sarge. Nothing that will end this war." "Good. Keep doing your job. The bosses want this area cleared before the next attack comes." Saul said okay and kept searching. He could see how the battle had happened just by looking at the ground. The human fighters had held their positions just long enough for help to arrive. But so many died that winning didn't feel different from losing. The aliens called Etherans liked to make careful attacks and mess with people's minds. Humans just shot everything with massive firepower and refused to give up. Usually both sides got destroyed with nobody really winning. Saul was looking at a really big crater when he saw her. An Etheran woman lay still next to the twisted metal of what his scanner said was a command ship. Her crystal-like skin caught the afternoon light and changed from silver to dark blue. Even hurt and knocked out, she looked beautiful in a way that made Etherans both amazing and scary to humans. Her face looked like math equations instead of natural growth. Her body looked both graceful and powerful at the same time. But her wings made Saul stop walking and just stare. Etheran wings were famous among human soldiers. The training books described them as thin structures that let them fly by controlling gravity somehow. In real life, they looked like artwork that could actually work. Delicate frames of crystal bone held thin membranes that caught light like trapped rainbows. These wings were ruined. The thin structures hung in torn pieces. The frames bent at wrong angles that made Saul hurt just looking at them. Glowing blue liquid, Etheran blood, pooled under her body. She had injuries inside that needed help right away. What seemed strange was how nobody went near her. Other survivors, both human and Etheran, stayed far away from her. This seemed like more than just being careful on a battlefield. "Reeves!" Sergeant Hayes yelled loud enough to make loose metal rattle. "Get away from that one!" Saul looked up. His commanding officer walked toward him looking angry, like Saul was about to do something really stupid. "She's hurt, Sarge. She'll probably die without medical help. She's also Kathari class. That means she's a walking weapon who can turn your brain to mush." Hayes got close to Saul but stopped outside the invisible circle other soldiers had made around the alien. "See those marks on her uniform? She's a battle scion. The kind who can kill you just by thinking about it. Then use your dead body like a puppet." Saul studied the unconscious woman. He noticed the fancy writing on her collar that showed her rank and job. "Has anyone tried to give her medical help? Son, do you see anyone else standing where you're standing? There's a reason for that." Hayes pointed at other survivors scattered across the battlefield. "Even the other Etherans won't go near her. When your own people think you're too dangerous to save, that should tell you something. It tells me both sides abandoned her in a war where being a coward looks like being smart." Hayes stared at him for a long time. "Reeves, I've known you for 3 years. You never seemed suicidal before. Don't start now. I'm a medic, Sarge. My job is to save lives, not decide whose life matters more." Your job is to follow orders and stay alive long enough to save lives that help us win this war. Saul kept studying the wounded Etherin. He watched her chest move up and down in a way that meant she had trouble breathing. Has anyone thought that maybe she can't use her mind powers right now? I mean, if she could kill people with thoughts, wouldn't she have stopped herself from getting shot down? Or maybe she's pretending to be unconscious to trick some soft-hearted human medic who wants to play hero. There's only one way to know for sure. Before Hayes could stop him, Saul crossed the invisible barrier that fear had built around the wounded Etherin. He expected a mental attack or energy weapons or at least some kind of warning from the woman everyone thought was faking. Instead, he found himself looking into eyes that had opened to watch him. Eyes that changed from silver to purple as her crystal skin showed what looked like surprise. "You are either very brave or very stupid human," she said in perfect human language with an accent. Her voice had extra tones that seemed to vibrate in his chest. Saul knelt next to her and opened his medical scanner. "Probably both. But you're bleeding to death and I'm a medic. Everything else can wait." Her laugh sounded bitter but actually musical. "I am Lyra Casvane of the 7th Fleet. I am a battle scion, a weapon made to kill your kind with just a thought. Why would you help your enemy? Because right now you're not my enemy. You're just someone who needs help." Saul turned on his medical scanner. The readings confirmed what he could see. Badly damaged wings, bleeding inside, maybe spine injury from the crash. Nothing that would kill her in the next few minutes, but she definitely needed treatment in the next few hours. "Your scanner works on Etherin bodies?" Lyra asked, watching him read the data. "Field medics learn to treat different species. Turns out living things are more similar than different, no matter which planet you came from." Saul started preparing treatment. He noticed how she watched his every move like someone checking for threats. "But I have to ask, if you can kill people with your mind, why didn't your own people come get you?" Something painful crossed her face. Pain that had nothing to do with her body. "Because my own military no longer considers me loyal." Meaning I found out things about my commanders that made me unable to keep serving them. Her skin turned darker blue, showing emotional pain. "When you refuse to help with terrible crimes, you become disposable." Saul stopped preparing medicine. What kind of terrible crimes? The kind where captured human prisoners get used as parts in biological experiments. Lyra's voice carried tones of disgust and anger. The kind that Admiral Thoron Vex Mailer thinks are necessary to win the war. The meaning hit Saul like a punch. "Your own commanders are experimenting on human prisoners?" "Were. I destroyed the lab and freed the survivors before Admiral Thoron could finish his research." Her eyes met his, showing emotions too complicated for her crystal skin to display. "That's why my wings were targeted during the battle. That's why no Etherin rescue teams came for me. I'm a traitor to my own species for refusing to be a monster." Saul looked around the battlefield. He noticed how both human and Etherin survivors stayed far away from them. "And now you're stuck between two sides. One thinks you're a threat and the other thinks you're a traitor. That accurately describes my situation, yes?" "Well," Saul said, going back to his medical work, "I guess that makes two of us, because helping you will probably end my military career. But I'm going to do it anyway." "Why?" Saul thought about the question while setting up a blood replacement system. "Because 18 months of this war taught me something. The moment we stop seeing enemies as people who might need help, we become the kind of monsters that make wars happen in the first place." Lyra stayed quiet for several moments. Her skin cycled through colors that showed complex feelings. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded warmer than before. "Saul Reeves, human medic of the Colonial Defense Corps. You are either the most foolish person I have met or the wisest. I have not decided which yet. Ask me again when we see if this gets us both killed." As Saul worked to fix her injuries, he noticed soldiers from both sides watching them. Some looked curious. Others looked suspicious. A few watched with the kind of interest that meant they saw intelligence value in what was happening. The war between humans and Etherans started as an argument over colony worlds. It grew into a fight over resources. Then it turned into the kind of life-or-death struggle where winning seemed less important than making sure the enemy lost. But kneeling next to an enemy soldier whose crime was refusing to commit horrible acts, Saul started wondering if real victory might come from remembering what both species were supposed to be fighting for. "Your medical skill is quite good," Lyra observed as he sealed the worst damage to her wings with special polymers. "Do all human medics learn Etheran anatomy?" "Just the ones who think they might end up treating enemy wounded," Saul answered. "Turns out caring about others doesn't recognize species boundaries, even if military rules do. An interesting belief. I hope it works better for you than my principles worked for me. We'll find out together." The field hospital on Titan 7 occupied what used to be a mining office building. Now it had military shields and medical equipment that could handle injuries from weapons that broke several space treaties. Saul helped Lyra through the makeshift entrance. He noticed how every conversation stopped when other medical workers realized what species she was. "This should be interesting," Lyra murmured. Her crystal skin shifted to dull gray colors that suggested resignation mixed with worry. Dr. Sarah Chun, the chief medical officer, walked over looking like she was about to have a very hard conversation. "Reeves, what exactly do you think you're doing?" "Bringing in a patient who needs immediate surgery for wing repair and internal bleeding," Saul replied like it was normal. "Standard battlefield medical procedures." Standard procedures don't usually involve treating enemy battle scions who could kill everyone in this building. Lyra spoke up. Her voice carried the musical undertones that made Etheran's speech sound like singing, even when talking about violence. "Dr. Chun, I currently cannot access my mental powers due to brain trauma from my crash. I represent no threat to your medical staff. And I'm supposed to just believe you? You're supposed to trust the medical scanner readings that prove her statement," Saul interrupted, handing Dr. Chen his diagnostic data. "Brain activity is low across all higher functions. She couldn't lift a pencil with her mind right now, much less attack people mentally." Dr. Chen studied the scanner data. Her face changed from suspicion to professional interest. "These readings are fascinating. I've never seen Etheran brain patterns during injury recovery. The whole crystal structure responds differently to damage than organic brain tissue." "Dr. Chun," Saul said carefully, "there's something else you should know. Lyra has information about Etheran war crimes, specifically illegal experiments on human prisoners." The room seemed to get colder. "What kind of experiments?" Lyra answered directly. Her skin displayed patterns that Saul was learning meant deep emotional pain. "Admiral Thoron Vex Mailer has been using captured humans as biological parts in mental power experiments, harvesting brain tissue, trying to transfer consciousness, attempting to create hybrid biological weapons using human thought patterns." Dr. Chun set down the medical scanner hard enough to make nearby equipment rattle. "That violates every treaty between species about prisoner treatment." "Yes, which is why I destroyed his research lab and freed the surviving test subjects. Which is also why I was targeted for elimination during the battle." Lyra gestured to her damaged wings. "Admiral Thoron needed to make sure I couldn't report his activities to Etheran High Command or human intelligence." "You're not just a wounded enemy," Dr. Chun realized. "You're a potential intelligence source with information that could change the entire war." Their conversation got interrupted by Colonel Amanda Singh arriving with two intelligence specialists. Their presence meant word of Lyra's situation had reached higher command very quickly. Dr. Chun, I understand you're treating an enemy battle scion, Colonel Singh said without small talk. I need to know her current threat level and intelligence value. Threat level is minimal due to brain trauma, Dr. Chun replied. Intelligence value appears to be substantial. Colonel Singh turned her attention to Lyra, who met the scrutiny with the kind of calm that suggested noble training. I am Colonel Singh, commanding officer for this sector. I understand you have information about Etheran military activities. I have evidence of war crimes committed by Admiral Thoron Vexmailer and his research division. Evidence that includes detailed records of experiments done on human prisoners. Lyra's skin shifted to colors that Saul was learning showed determination mixed with anger. Evidence I'm willing to share in exchange for protection from Etheran forces trying to kill me. Protection in exchange for intelligence cooperation. That's a big offer. Colonel Singh glanced at the intelligence specialists who were recording everything. What kind of protection do you want? Safe passage to neutral territory where I can present my evidence to proper interspecies authorities. I have no desire to remain trapped in a war that has become about atrocities and betrayal. One of the intelligence specialists leaned forward. What proof do you have that this evidence exists? How do we know you're not just trying to defect with fake information? Lyra held out her hand, showing a small crystal device that pulsed with internal light. This data crystal contains complete records of Admiral Thoron's experimental programs, including visual documentation and biological samples. It also contains messages between Admiral Thoron and certain political figures who have been keeping the war going for money. The room fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. Saul realized they were seeing something that could fundamentally change the conflict between their species, if Lyra survived long enough to share her evidence. Colonel, Dr. Chan said quietly, I should mention that treating her injuries properly will take several days of intensive care. Wing reconstruction is delicate work, especially with Etheran biocrystal structures. And during that time she'll be vulnerable to elimination attempts from her own forces. Which means we have a week to extract intelligence and provide protection. Colonel Singh nodded slowly. Dr. Chun, I'm authorizing full medical support for the patient. Intelligence will coordinate security measures. As the command staff left to arrange protective measures, Saul found himself alone with Lyra in the medical bay's intensive care unit. She was connected to monitoring equipment that tracked vital signs he was still learning to understand. But her color patterns suggested she was awake and aware. You realize what you've done? She asked quietly. I've provided medical care to someone who needed it. Everything else is politics. Politics that may have saved both our species from continuing a war based on lies and manufactured hatred. Her skin shifted to warmer tones that Saul was starting to associate with gratitude. Though it may also have put you in considerable danger. Admiral Thoron has people throughout this sector, humans as well as Etherans who profit from continued conflict. Are you saying there's a conspiracy to keep the war going? I'm saying that weapons manufacturers, territorial governors, and certain military commanders on both sides have discovered that peace is bad for business. Lyra's eyes met his, showing intelligence and determination that made her earlier helplessness seem fake. The evidence I carry implicates individuals from both species who have been manipulating events to maintain profitable conflict. Saul felt the universe shift around him as he understood the implications. This isn't just about stopping war crimes. This is about exposing the people who have been orchestrating the entire war. Now you begin to understand why I was targeted for elimination rather than simple capture. Lyra smiled, an expression that changed her features from alien beauty to something recognizably warm and human. Though I should mention that agreeing to help me has probably made you a target too. Wonderful. Anything else I should know? Yes. Admiral Thoron's recovery forces will likely try to infiltrate this facility within the next 24 hours. When they do, they'll target both of us. Me to prevent testimony. You to eliminate the witness who can confirm my presence here. Saul thought about this while checking her medical connections and monitoring her recovery progress. In that case, we'd better make sure you're mobile enough to defend yourself when they arrive. You're not worried about the danger? I'm terrified, Saul admitted. But I'm also curious to see what happens when someone finally tells the truth about this war. Besides, someone needs to make sure your wings heal properly. And I appear to be the only medic crazy enough to try. Lyra's laughter filled the medical bay with harmonics that made the monitoring equipment show fluctuations in ways Saul had never seen before. For the first time since the war began, he found himself looking forward to discovering what might be possible when enemies chose cooperation over conflict. Outside the medical facility, Titan VII's double sunset painted the sky in colors that had no names in any human language. Ships from both fleets kept careful distances that spoke of exhaustion rather than strategy. But in the intensive care unit, two individuals from warring species worked together on healing that went beyond the boundaries of biology, politics, and the artificial barriers that made peace seem impossible. The infiltration attempt came during the third night, just as Lyra had predicted. But the execution was more sophisticated than Saul had expected. Instead of a direct assault, Admiral Thoron's operatives chose subtlety, a small team of humans and Etherans working together. Their cooperation ironically demonstrated exactly the kind of interspecies coordination that the war was supposedly preventing. Saul was monitoring Lyra's wing reconstruction progress when the facility's security sensors registered multiple perimeter breaches. The alerts were subtle, designed to look like equipment malfunctions rather than coordinated infiltration. But Lyra's enhanced hearing caught sound patterns that human ears missed. "They're here," she said quietly. Her skin shifted to deep purple, showing alertness mixed with resignation. 3 entry points, about 8 operatives total. They'll target the power systems first, then move to eliminate witnesses before extracting me. Extract you or kill you? Kill me. Then remove my body to prevent autopsy from revealing the extent of Admiral Thoron's research. Lyra tried to sit up, her face twisted with pain as her healing wings protested the movement. The data crystal I carry contains evidence that could bring down military commanders and political figures on both sides. They cannot allow it to reach interspecies authorities. Saul activated the facility's emergency communication system, alerting Colonel Singh and security forces to the infiltration. How long do we have? Perhaps 10 minutes before they reach this section. Less if they encounter no significant resistance. And your current combat ability? Minimal. Brain trauma has reduced my mental abilities to basic telepathic sensing. I can detect their locations but cannot launch offensive attacks. Lyra's skin displayed frustration along with pain. I am dependent on others for protection. A novel experience for a battle scion. Saul moved to secure the medical bay's defensive systems, such as they were. The facility had been designed for treating wounded, not withstanding military assault. Lyra, I need to ask you something. Is the evidence you're carrying worth both of us dying to protect? The evidence documents the systematic torture and murder of thousands of prisoners from both species, along with correspondence proving that certain individuals have been deliberately prolonging the war for profit. Her voice carried tones of absolute conviction. It is worth any sacrifice to ensure this information reaches people who can act on it. Then we better make sure it gets where it needs to go. Saul accessed the medical facility's quantum communication array, normally used for consulting specialists on complex cases. If Admiral Thoron's operatives were willing to risk everything to prevent Lyra's evidence from being transmitted, The logical solution was to transmit it immediately. Saul, what are you doing? Insurance policy. If we're about to die defending this information, we might as well make sure it survives even if we don't. He began uploading the data crystal's contents to multiple destinations: Colonial Defense Command, Ethran High Command, and several neutral worlds that maintained independent news services. Let Admiral Thoron try to suppress evidence that's already in the hands of investigators from 6 different species. Lyra's skin shifted to colors Saul had never seen before, brilliant golds and silvers that seemed to pulse with their own light. You're transmitting state secrets of both our species to neutral authorities. I'm making sure the truth gets told regardless of what happens to us. Saul completed the uploads just as the facility's main power systems failed, plunging them into emergency lighting. Besides, seems to me that anything worth killing to suppress is probably worth preserving. The infiltrators reached the medical bay faster than expected, their approach coordinated with military precision. Saul found himself face to face with a mixed team of humans and Etherans whose cooperation was both impressive and terrifying, proof that the species could work together when they shared common interests, even if those interests involved eliminating witnesses to war crimes. Dr. Reeves, said the team leader, a human colonel whose insignia Saul didn't recognize. You are interfering with a classified military operation. Stand aside and you will not be harmed. Classified military operation? You mean the one where you murder a wounded prisoner to cover up evidence of war crimes? I mean the operation where we prevent sensitive intelligence from compromising ongoing military activities. The colonel's expression was professionally neutral, but his weapon remained aimed at Saul's center mass. The Etheran prisoner represents a security risk that requires immediate containment. Lyra spoke from her medical bed, her voice carrying authority despite her prone position. Colonel, I am Lyra Casvane, daughter of the Third House, bearer of military honors from the siege of Kiel Station. What authority do you claim to justify my assassination? Authority derived from necessity, replied one of the Etheran operatives, whose markings showed intelligence service rather than line military. Your betrayal of Admiral Thoron's research has compromised strategic advantages that took decades to develop. My exposure of Admiral Thoron's atrocities has revealed activities that violate every principle both our species claim to defend, Lyra corrected. Though I note your willingness to cooperate with humans when it serves your purposes. Perhaps if more such cooperation occurred in pursuit of peace rather than murder, this war could end. The standoff stretched for several tense minutes, with both sides aware that violence would trigger facility-wide security responses that none of them wanted to face. Saul used the time to assess his options, none of which seemed likely to result in anyone surviving the next few minutes. The situation changed when Colonel Singh's voice echoed through the facility's communication system. All personnel, this is command. We have received confirmed intelligence regarding war crimes committed by military personnel from both species. Effective immediately, all operations related to prisoner elimination or evidence suppression are hereby terminated. Any personnel discovered participating in such activities will face court-martial and criminal prosecution. The infiltration team's leader consulted a portable communication device. His expression shifted from confidence to uncertainty as he received new orders. Stand down, he said finally. Operation parameters have changed. Changed how? Asked the Etheran intelligence operative. Changed because the evidence has already been transmitted to appropriate authorities on both sides, along with several neutral worlds. The colonel looked at Saul with something resembling professional respect. Dr. Reeves, your data transmission has made this operation pointless. There's no longer any strategic value in suppressing information that's already in the hands of investigators. As the infiltration team withdrew, Saul realized their victory was simultaneously smaller and larger than he'd expected. Smaller because they'd survived through luck and timing rather than heroism. Larger because the evidence Lyra carried was now in the hands of people who could act on it. Saul, Lyra said quietly after the immediate danger had passed, do you realize what you have accomplished? I've probably ended my military career and started an interspecies incident. Beyond that, I'm not sure. You have made it impossible for the war to continue in its current form. Her skin displayed patterns that Saul was learning to associate with profound gratitude mixed with amazement. The evidence you transmitted will trigger investigations that reach the highest levels of both governments. Those who profit from conflict will no longer be able to operate in shadows. Over the following days, as Lyra's wings healed and the first reports emerged from the joint investigations her evidence had triggered, Saul began to understand the magnitude of what they'd uncovered. The war between humans and Etherans hadn't been the result of inevitable conflict between expanding civilizations. It had been deliberately orchestrated and prolonged by individuals who profited from the suffering it caused. 17 arrests so far, Colonel Singh reported during one of her daily briefings, including Admiral Thoron and 3 human fleet commanders who were coordinating black market weapons sales to both sides. What happens now? Saul asked. Now we see whether 2 species can learn to trust each other after discovering they've been manipulated into conflict. Colonel Singh's expression suggested she was cautiously optimistic. The Joint Tribunal investigating war crimes has recommended immediate ceasefire negotiations. Both governments have agreed to participate. Lyra, whose wings now bore permanent scars but were functional again, had become something unprecedented. An enemy officer whose cooperation with human forces had exposed corruption in both militaries. The peace negotiations will be complex, she observed. There are many on both sides who benefit from continued hostility. But there are also people on both sides who are tired of fighting wars based on lies, Saul replied. Maybe that's enough to build something better. 18 months later, Saul stood on the observation deck of the Joint Medical Station orbiting Concordia, a neutral world that had become the center for interspecies cooperation initiatives. The station was staffed by medical personnel from both species, working together on treatments and procedures that benefited everyone. Lyra joined him at the viewport. Her healed wings caught the station's artificial lighting in patterns that still took his breath away. Their relationship had evolved far beyond patient and caregiver, though defining what it had become required vocabulary that neither species possessed. The expansion approval came through, she said, handing him a data pad with official communications from multiple governments. 12 new worlds will receive joint medical programs based on our protocols. 12 worlds where humans and Etherans work together instead of trying to kill each other, Saul mused. It's not the end of the war, but it's a beginning. The beginning of something neither species imagined was possible. Lyra's skin shifted to the warm golds that Saul had learned indicated deep contentment. Though I should mention that your approach to Etheran wing reconstruction has become required study in our medical academies, and your insights into human trauma psychology are revolutionizing our treatment protocols. Saul smiled, remembering the wounded enemy he'd found on a battlefield that now seemed like ancient history. Turns out compassion doesn't recognize species boundaries. An excellent principle for building peace. Outside the station's viewports, ships from dozens of worlds arrived daily to participate in programs that proved cooperation was not only possible, but more effective than competition. The war between humans and Etherans continued in some sectors, but its foundations had been undermined by the simple revelation that enemies could choose to help each other rather than destroy each other. Saul reflected on the strange journey that had brought them from a battlefield to a symbol of interspecies cooperation. It had begun with a medic's instinct to heal rather than harm, continued through a warrior's choice to expose truth rather than maintain loyalty, and resulted in something that transcended the boundaries of species, politics, and the artificial barriers that made peace seem impossible. Any regrets? Lyra asked, echoing a question she'd posed during her recovery. Only that it took a war to teach us what we could accomplish by working together, Saul replied. Though I suppose that's how most important discoveries happen, when people are forced to choose between fear and hope. And which did we choose? Saul watched another ship dock at the station, carrying medical personnel who would learn to heal injuries they'd never encountered before in species they'd been taught to fear. We chose to find out what was possible when enemies decided to become allies instead. The answer seemed to satisfy both of them, though Saul suspected it was really just the beginning of a much larger conversation, one that might eventually include entire civilizations learning to ask the same question.